everyone, I'm Lisa Walton and welcome to Artist Stories. Today I'm talking to fellow Aussie Heidi Helyard, who does the most beautiful polymer and resin art, and it's great to speak to her because I've just admired her work for ages and I'm a great follower of her work, which is really quite unique and definitely has the look of Heidi every time I see it. So welcome, Heidi.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks so much for having me.
We're going to have a look at some of your work and how it's developing and how you get your name out in the world as well. I think in this day and age, it's quite important to have a presence online, and we're going to talk a little bit about how you do that. I really like this photo of you. You're not looking up, you're just sort of thinking, I think.
Yeah.
The other thing I really like about your work is your branding. And I believe you were a graphic artist in your previous life, or you still do a bit of it?
Yeah, previous, present. Yeah, I've been a graphic designer for nearly 20 years now and freelance for most of that. So I still can't let it go. And I have a few really special clients that I like working with.
So we're going to talk about your jewellery mainly, but also we're going to talk about some of the other things you're moving into. And so this is one of your pieces, and this is polymer clay.
Yes, so polymer, but with some additional metallic findings. I think I called this collection circuit board collection. A lot of my work is really busy, but a lot of my work is also really simple and really minimalist. And I really love overlapping shapes. I love texture and three-dimensional work as well. And this was me trying to sort of get a little bit above a flat sort of, piece of jewelry. And by embedding the metallic findings, I had some interesting ones, when just one interesting finding or one interesting just gives you a whole raft of ideas. And I think it was that gold sort of circular metal finding that just started all this off. And I thought, well, what if I just squish it into the clay, but then I need to add other things over it to sort of practically keep it in there, but also it looks nice. I like the overlapping. And so, and then there's very subtle texture in that as well. And it was very playful and a really exploratory sort of collection for me, that one. It ended up being picked up by a overseas blog, Polymer Week blog as well, which was a bit of a thrill. So yeah, I really enjoyed. Very fiddly though.
I think it's all very fiddly, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's true. Now that that's true. But sometimes I think when things are really small, like those circles, those really tiny circles within that gold one are like, tiny, and it's tweezers and, craft knife, and just even getting it on the clay is quite tricky.
I was thinking that just the manipulation of it without sort of getting great big fingerprints on it and sort of distorting the shape must be quite tricky.
Very much so. You sort of choose the right clay too for that, and you don't do it in the middle of summer.
First thing we're just going to talk about are slabs. And so would you like to tell everybody what a slab is? So
polymer clay slab, there's two terms in the polymer world you'll hear that are kind of interchangeable but also different, and that is a polymer clay veneer and a polymer clay slab. Now, polymer clay veneers are thinner and are usually rolled. They can be rolled really thin to almost like 1 mil thick, and they're usually used to cover other things, whether that be beads or blanks or dishes or vessels, things like that. And they have been around. Technically, they've been around for a really long time in the traditional polymer clay world. So look, so have slabs as well. Slabs are nothing new, but it is just a term that's kind of been made popular in recent years. And it's really popular because you kind of create this. I often, when I'm teaching about slabs, I talk about it. You've got a base like a pizza, and you've got toppings like a pizza, and you spread them out evenly, and then you cut it up. So it's essentially and almost like you'd probably relate to this it's like a fabric design. Usually it's a repeating pattern that, can be rotated any which way and can be cut up, and it's still recognizable of the pattern. And so you create a slab, and the beauty of them is you can get out of a slab that size, which is probably like half an A4 page, you could get 5 or 6 pairs of earrings out of that. And lo and behold, you have an instant collection. And I think that's the appeal to a lot of makers, that you can bang out quite a few consistent pieces quite quickly. Just talking about collections, I've noticed that the majority of people do collections and they release them on a certain date, I guess, to have their fans sort of anticipate something. That's something that I found quite interesting and quite different.
Is that a marketing tool, or is that just ease of making, or how does that work really?
Oh, look, it works differently for different people. And I've talked a lot of this about this with other makers when I do mentoring sessions as well. It's something I've experimented with. I have done the big, anticipate the release and then release it all at once. And I have also done the drip feed. It's another term where you put into your shop what you make as you make it. And that way then, you can, when you post it on Instagram, whoever sees it knows it's available instantly. But in my experience, I don't get as many sales when I do that. And also, I quite like now, and I'm in the rhythm of, I like the cycle. And for me, it's monthly. It's sort of 4 to 6 weeks. It can be different. It doesn't have to be monthly. There's no rules to any of this. But I do find if I'm talking monthly, I'll do sort of, make, preview on Instagram. And it is about building hype. It's about telling a story, about giving that customers, as much as other makers love the behind the scenes stuff and how I made something and maybe what the inspiration was or how I maybe stuffed up, but build a story, build momentum, build excitement, and drip feed your pieces. I'm also a big believer in giving my customers advance notice. Like, I think it's important for people that are spending hard-earned sort of cash that they've got a date perhaps they can save up for. Maybe they don't want anything this release because it's always different. But if they do, everyone will usually at least get 2 weeks notice. And so that for me, from a customer service point of view, is important. But it also gives me time to sort of do my other marketing, which is email, newsletters, Instagram stuff, of course, as I've mentioned, and getting the website ready. So I like my monthly cycle consists of being really super creative, then being really super productive in making and finishing, then, a bit of marketing, and then some sort of lovely brain dead week of packing orders. And then the cycle begins again. And I quite like the up and down, creative, not so creative, got to take heaps of photos, but then I get to be creative again somewhat on Instagram and with photos and things. And then that sort of lull, I get all the packing done in a few days, and then I kind of like that the cycle starts again. So it works for me. It doesn't work for everyone. I still have stuff in the shop all the time, which is important to me as well. I don't ever want my shop to have nothing in it. So I always have enough stock, and there's always something in my shop.
And this one is a more complex one?
I don't know if I'd say it's more complex, but because it's still quite a simple, it's a repeating pattern. I've used sort of some granite clay there for a little bit of difference. What the difference is with this one is, instead of texture, or I've added texture, but within that texture I've added some chalk pastel detailing, which is something I really like doing. It's again really fiddly and really messy, but the result is really lovely and really imperfect, which I really like. And it just gives a different, and it gives a whole, like texturing a slab, gives it some depth. This sort of does as well. So, and that's the beauty of slabs. They can be really simple with just abstract patterns and no texturing, or they can be really complex with 3-dimensional details and features. The slab is essentially a piece of clay, is thick enough to be, a standalone item. I'll use slabs to make earrings, pendants, trinket dishes, and even wall hangings. So they're very versatile as well.
Here is a small collection, and these look to be glazed or covered in resin, or are they just polished and buffed?
These are resin coated. This was a really experimental, this was where I just sort of threw all caution to the wind and just tried something out I'd never done before. And it's one of those things, Lisa, I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to recreate it the same. Essentially, it's really thin sheets of translucent clay with the black detailing you see there is paper transfer. So me doing drawings and then printing them off on a laser printer, and then you transfer it onto the clay by wetting it and rubbing the paper off really carefully, and then overlapping that, and I'm talking like 1 millimeter thick sheets of translucent clay overlapped, and then some alcohol ink detailing, and then at the very end, because it's quite, they weren't the most beautiful finished on the top surface, so the resin just sort of fixed all of that.
They look great though. And
look, the tops, metallic clay, metallic polymer clay tops, which sort of match the alcohol ink colours and sort of draw from that. So there's a bit of old and new, I guess, in that one, that collection.
You do sort of mix your textures quite a bit, don't you?
Yeah, look, it's really important to me. Like, the resin is new to me, but I wouldn't be doing resin if I didn't know polymer. And I'm always trying to bring the polymer and the resin together as much as I can. So yeah, it's important for me to keep making, have both mediums interacting, and I keep learning by using them together as well.
Again, something completely different.
So yeah, something again. This again was, oh, you know what, Lisa, I think what it is, a lot of the time the medium will inspire me. And these were made when Fimo leather first came out, which was a brand new line of Fimo polymer clay. And it's so exciting when a brand new product comes out. The Fimo leather was marketed as something you could cure really thin, cut with scissors, and it can even be stitched in a sewing machine and made into sort of purses. There's a lot of people making purses and things with sort of stud closures and things like that. So I loved, with this, all the circles you see there were done with a hole punch. The clay ones, I just cured it into sheets like fabric, and I looked at these sheets and I said, what do I want to make out of them? So there's some familiar shapes in there to me, some arches and things like that. And I then managed to find sort of 3 different sized hole punches. And then it was just like an assembly job. There's also, I think, some reoccurring themes for me is layering, and these also, to me, as complex as they are, they're still pretty simple and graphic and bold, sort of flat colour, that kind of stuff. So it was really just how far can I push this medium in this sort of, it was almost like playing with paper, you know, coloured paper.
The pieces, were they stuck on with glue or with polymer liquid clay or?
I did these with glue because they were so tiny, and that worked after some initial experiments with that. And as you say, the polymer, the liquid glue was better for the job I needed to do. So a really good super glue.
And now we've gone a bit metallic.
Metallic and texture. It's nice to bring things back to their bare bones occasionally. And metallic, these metallic colours are a reoccurring kind of, this colourway will pop up in my work on and off. I keep coming back to it. This was sort of a play in texture. There's some micro cutters, there's old drilled bits of clay that I had, and balling tools and all the fun sort of basics we've got in the studio. And I think I just, again, very similar to the last one, banged out a lot of, you know, thin sheets of clay with different texture, and then went ahead and just cut out, you know, 2 of everything so that I could make a pair. And then I quite enjoy doing that is then I will then pick them and build the earrings after. So I'm not pre-emptying those earrings at all. It's sort of, they come to me after the piece has been in the oven, and I start mixing and matching things like that. And this was also, the colour you see within those textures are mica powders, so metallic on metallic.
A lot of this looks to be hand cut. Or do you have your own cutters, or you cut around templates?
A bit of everything. One of my favourite things to do is to get old metallic metal cutters and just bend them a little bit, and you then end up with just quite, you know, actually unique organic shapes. You will laugh though, that half shape, that half semicircle you see there is actually a cutter, and it is quite popular. I do see it pop up every now and again in the polymer world, which is absolutely fine. But it comes down to, I tend to keep my shapes simple. I tend to not use overly trend-driven or overly complicated shapes. And I think that's one way I possibly get around hopefully standing out. So these are all quite simple. They're all quite organic. I am drawn to organic shapes for sure. And I think a lot of the circle shapes in this collection are possibly little metal ones that I've bent, but all the rectangles and the little capsules and the squares, I think a lot of those, these are all really small scale pieces, like really small and really dainty. So I think my micro cutters are a big feature in this collection. Whenever I do a collection, there are never 2 pairs exactly the same. Even if I've done a slab and I cut out 2 large round, like let's say there's 2 pairs of round earrings, the tops will have different colours. So there's never 2 identical earrings. And that's part, for me, I think part of why my customers like getting an absolutely one-off pair of earrings. It's awful when it comes to, I've got to list every single pair and I have to photograph every single pair. So it's a big job, but it's worth it. And that's how I like to work anyway. For me, it's not fun making 4 pairs with the exact same bottom and the exact same top. So yeah, so every pair, I might have a big collection. This for me is quite a decent sized collection, but every pair is a complete one-off.
You mentioned photography there. You have a very graphic style of photography. Are you an experienced photographer or is it hit and miss? Very crisp.
I keep it really simple because that's part of my brand. It's a big part of my brand, actually, that idea of my pieces being in an art gallery. I want to put myself forward as an artist. And so that's why the white walls, that's why the logo is really minimalist. That's why my earring cards are white, like a white gallery wall. It is also my experience as a graphic designer. A good graphic designer sits in the background. My branding is to go unnoticed because the earrings are the heroes. So for me, putting those kind of earrings or any of my earrings on a busy earring card or on a busy background would not work for me. I use my phone, I don't use a camera, I keep it really simple, and I don't have photography experience. What's happening here is me exploring reusing clay, or exploring kind of the journey of the very piece on the end is a very small piece from a Mokume gane slab or veneer, which is quite a complicated process based on Japanese metalworking, but it's very popular though within traditional polymer clay makers. And you do get a lot of waste from it because it's a technique where you layer the clay, you distress the clay, and then you cut away, you slice away the clay to reveal a beautiful pattern. And you get scraps from those initial cut slices, but also when after the pieces have been cut away, you get these scraps, but the scraps are crazy detailed and crazy precious. And one thing I do with first stage of scraps is make those tube beads, because you can see the layers in those pieces, and there's a way I manipulate them to get them to look that sort of stripy and very different to what you see at the beginning. And then you'll probably see the third lot of components is scraps from when I make the tube beads. I have to cut the ends off, the top and end, to get a clean cut, and those bits are made from that. So, and again, they're tiny, tiny slivers of clay, but they're so detailed. And I love the torn edge look of those scraps in particular. So they're not to be thrown away. If I was to just remix them, it'd end up being sort of just a dark coppery metallic clay that I would probably only use for putting something over. But I do love using those precious, precious pieces as one-off. The last bit is sort of essentially just the scraps of everything mixed together and then made into a new cane, and then slicing it vertically in this instance and then reworking it. And this is a really good example. The pendant shows the Mokume, that a very initial slice of the Mokume that I slice off and peel off and flip over. Those circular earrings underneath the pendant shows the original Mokume. It's like the scraps become kind of more diluted. The original Mokume is really intense, it's really colourful, and everything gets diluted. In amongst that though, there's that donut shaped piece is very much just the sort of last part of the scraps. The sort of rectangle pair up the top with the hook with that texturing is those scraps. Instead of the tube bead, it's been rolled flat. And even the pieces that are terrazzo, like the large circle under that rectangle, the terrazzo bits of that are the very, very thin scraps from that original Mokume. So to me, that's a really cohesive collection because of the colouring. There's various features that are similar, but it's also really varied as well.
I like the texture. It looks a bit like sandstone.
That's just a texture sponge, which is they've been around and used by traditional polymer makers forever. And they're a fantastic tool for hiding imperfections. Metallic clay can be really tricky to work with because it's particularly certain brands, the certain ones are beautiful, but they're quite soft clays and they can sometimes bubble. And using that texture sponge before you cure it, it just can transform the clay and also hide a multitude of sins.
Now this looks really different.
Look, I wanted to include this with our talk today just because collaborating with other makers is a big part of my work, and especially working with other makers that don't work with the same medium as me. And in this instance, I was working with a wonderful maker. Her name is Kate and her business is called Dens & Co. And she makes these incredible steel earrings, like they're steel. And she also works with enamel. So here all of the clay pieces are made from pressing into the clay her steel earrings. And again, I essentially used her earrings as texture sheets within the clay and added colour. So they're quite stylised, as you can see. They're not very accurate, but we made some stylised sort of, the cockatoo's got a bit of white and a little bit of yellow and a little bit of yellow at the feet and some different colour for the beak. So very sort of graphic, stylised, sketchy. I would then press her metallic earring into the clay, and then again the third step was to add some chalk pastel again similar to how I did with that other slab we talked about. Clean it all off, and then this is a photo we took where it was choosing the colours for the stud tops that she was going to make out of enamel. So it's this, she sends me things, I do something, and then she also brings something else to the table. And that's, I think, when it's collaborating too, when I collaborate with another maker, I want to create something brand new that neither I've done before and neither that maker has done before, so that it's something brand new for followers and customers.
All the links to Kate and to all of Heidi's links are below in the description box, so please check them out. These are just gorgeous.
This again was like me pushing the medium and trying to see what I could do with the medium. I have been a graphic designer long enough to remember when we used to do it on the presses with film, and a big part of printing is cyan, magenta, yellow, black. CMYK is a big part of printing. So this is me playing with only essentially pink clay, blue clay and yellow clay, and making it into a liquid or a paste and then scraping it over each other. And I will say I was pleasantly surprised at how well this turned out. Could have been really muddy, and I think that I managed to work out a technique. So it's 3 colours and you end up sort of getting 5.
It reminds me a lot of working with organza and fabric.
Yes, that overlapping, and again overlapping something that keeps coming up in my work. And the texture too, I've done painted clay before, much thicker, more impasto sort of style. This is much more sort of subtle, but it's still, you can feel it, and I love that you can feel like the paint, you know, and I love that when people get them, they'll be able to feel it.
And did you use liquid polymer clay as well?
Yeah, so I had a play with sort of starting with liquid polymer and tinting it with some chalk pastels and things like that, and that I wasn't getting the saturation of colour that I needed. So I essentially worked backwards and started with solid clay and then incorporated liquid clay into that. It takes ages to do that, and my poor little hands mixing it up, it's quite the process.
This is very you.
Yes. So again, I'm going through a phase of being really interested in carving and stamp carving. I've been doing some stamp carving, and I know there are some amazing makers that do carving really incredibly into polymer. And I also wanted to see if I could make that technique my own. So this was just free-formed carving onto cured polymer clay sheets that were thick enough to withstand that and know that I could cut them up later. These were just, carved with a really fine stamp carving tool, and then painted into them and then wiped off, and then hand cut using a craft knife, which was all, again, I actually had to have quite a rest after this collection, and I've had some wonderful chats with some other much more experienced makers with me who's helped me tool up a little bit better with some sanding and things like that. So it is, and that's partly why I like Lisa. Once these were done, I then had to photograph them and knew I had a couple of weeks rest from making, give the hands a rest.
What sort of paint do you use?
Just acrylic paint in this instance. Paint pens and acrylic paint are extremely compatible with polymer clay. And in this instance, I do actually also have some really great heat setting paints that I use with silk screens. What I did though, and what I would do, so acrylic paint, and then I would, once it's all cleaned up, I would just cure it again. So rather than just let it air dry, cure it again.
And so the paint doesn't mind going in the oven?
No, not at all. So again, really simple, bold, graphic. This sort of shows where the stamp, so all of these shapes bar, I think that crosshatch one, were hand carved by me. And I'm always, like when I'm mark making, would rather do it from something I've made, I really love those handmade stamps. Most of the ones in there are hand carved, just with rubber, that you do for stamp printing, but they work beautifully in polymer. And then in these instances, chalk pastels, and had a play around with deviating from just using black chalk pastels to sort of like what would it look like with a dark blue on blue, or dark red on a red. And I do really love tone on tone, so that you get that monochrome, that red pair down the bottom is a monochrome pair. but you know, there's 3 tones of red within that one pair. So I really love that effect. They're also very textural too. You can feel, you know, because they've got indented texture.
And these are hoops. So hoops are quite fashionable at the moment, aren't they?
They're great if you're wearing a mask. They don't fall off when you're taking your mask on and off. I quite like wearing them too. They're really light. They sit away. They sort of, you know, the earring sits a little bit away from your ear. I really enjoy wearing hoops. I really enjoy making them as well. From a practical point of view, I don't have to make a stud top. And I just love how sometimes you just have to make whatever's on the hoop be amazing. You know, it has to sort of sing on its own without any additional components. So these were a play on texture, again, sort of metallic colours, various textures and various mica powders. And again, what I did here was just bang out a whole lot of pieces and mismatched. Mismatched is a bit of a trend that is quite fun. And these pieces were sold, as you can see there. So you got four earrings sort of in the one sort of product, and you could wear 2 out of those 4 and mix and match it. So I think I worked out you get like 8 pairs out of the one. Or I really like the ideas with the hoop of being able to layer them. So take off a circle off one hoop and overlay it over a square, you know, and you could then like layer them up. And I got to play with colours, shape, texture, and also give my customers, however many I did, you know, completely unique packs of earrings. This is sort of a Mokume series where I kind of did a deep dive into Mokume. So Mokume gane, there's a basic technique to it. If I explain it in a nutshell, you layer really thin sheets of clay on top of each other, and then you distress the top in all different kinds of ways, and then you cut away to reveal what's underneath. And this was a pretty minimalist Mokume where essentially all I did was layer it, but then poke my balling tool into it, different sizes, and then just cut away a few millimeters from the top surface. So hopefully that, you know, makes sense when looking at the pieces. And then they can get cut up into earrings. You get beautiful scraps from these. The initial slices are always really beautiful. And even because the clay's layered, and it's layered really thin, like if you stack it twice and flatten it again and stack again, so it's really complex laid clay, which yields really wonderful scraps too. I think I call these acid drop, because it looked like acid had been dropped onto the clay and sort of eaten into it. So I kind of liked that, the look, and that name seemed appropriate.
Do you have trouble naming your collections?
Oh, yes, all the time, yes. All the time. Sometimes it's really easy and sometimes it's really, really hard. So I tend to not overthink it. You know, I tend to try not to be too clever about it, and I just try, and if I can't think, I'll just call it, I don't know, I've got a beautiful book of colours, pigment colours, so sometimes I'll go, if there's a predominantly green colour, I might, you know, look it up, and malachite is a really, you know, old world pigment, and I love that, you know, so I might just sometimes be quite random, or it'll be quite obvious.
I like this granite clay.
It's a beautiful clay. It's kind of underutilized, I feel. And this, again, layering, texturing, again, some chalk pastel detailing, and some silk screens in there. So some of those layers have got silk screen patterns on it, and I really like when I'm using someone else's design. So when I've purchased someone else's silk screen, or if I've purchased someone else's texture sort of sheet, what I try and then do is what I like to do is, if I cut it up or really focus in on a small detail, I feel like I can then make it more my own, rather than, you know, incorporating the whole pattern that was designed by someone else. All the square shapes you see are inlays, so cutting out of one clay a shape, and then cutting that same hole in the granite and sort of inserting it in and out. So very fiddly and time consuming. Raw polymer clay is wonderful at adhering to other raw polymer clays.
And now we're going to jump into resin, and I just love these.
So this is one of my favourite. Look, this is the ultimate for me anyway, combining polymer clay and resin, because all of those circles you see within those coloured dishes are polymer clay slices, and they've been cut and then cured, and then they've been embedded in the resin. So I love that I can get the polymer front and centre into the resin.
Quite a time-consuming process, isn't it?
Yeah. So these are a 3-pour job. So the rims around them, the moulds that I use have got, like, you can see the rim. They're like a coaster, just a coaster mould with a rim around them, but you utilise using a syringe, you know, put the colour, the outside colour in first, let that set, and then embed the cane slices into some clear resin, and then wait for that to cure. And then the third and final pour is the back colour that you see. And then if there's bubbles when you demold them, then all that work has been not for nothing. There's ways of fixing it, but sometimes if there's a mistake, it can be quite heartbreaking after all the work. But yeah.
Well, if the resins usually takes 24 hours to cure, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's you batch process. So I'll do sort of however many molds I've got, do all the edges, let it sit, do all the cane slices, let it sit, then do all the back.
These are crystal clear and so graphic.
These kind of came before those dishes in my sort of, you know, evolution, but of wanting to get polymer clay cane slices into earrings and into resin in a different way. And I just, what resin gives me that translucent clay can't give me is that suspended in air look, crystal clear, like glass. And I can also get matte and gloss finishes and play with all of that. So the earrings were a training ground for being able to do those much more complex pieces like the dishes. These are scraps. I use a Dremel, so because I do quite a lot, and you end up with these different clays give you different shape drilling shavings. This particular clay obviously gave me very neat ones, and it maybe come down to sort of how long the clay was cured for and things like that. But I started collecting them because there was one collection I did where the colours were really colourful, and I was drilling them all. And I was looking at these beautiful sort of scraps on my, you know, surface that I drill on. I thought, I can't throw those out. So I put them aside, and I think I first started mixing these into translucent polymer clay to make like a granite clay. And that works beautifully. So you do it, and then you basically mix it into your translucent clay, cure your components, but then you have to do quite a bit of sanding on the top. That you go through various grits and things like that. It's extremely satisfying. And then, so I'd done that for a while. And then with my resin journey, I sort of went through very much of a will it resin phase and putting things into resin to see if it would look any good, if it would, you know, would be practical and feasible. And it came to a point where I had to try putting the drilling shavings. It does work, and it's great. I can kind of, you can see here, I've done the full gamut of black and white. I love working with negative space as much as I do with layering. So you'll see earrings where the drilling shavings are only at the bottom. It's a great way to use up really small scraps that also have a heap of detail in them.
This is part of your studio. I know I've seen a video of your studio remodel, and insanely jealous, but it's beautiful and light filled and just lovely. And you've got different areas for your different work, which is very important too, I think.
Oh, look, I've waited a really long time for a space. I was working in a very cramped office, spare bedroom corner, like one table. So it's a long time coming. Yeah, I'm very, very lucky now to be able to have a dedicated polymer table, which is the table you see there, and have a resin table, resin and silicon table, which is wonderful. And I also have because I still do computer work, I've got the computer in the dark corner away from the beautiful windows. So no, I'm very lucky and absolutely love the studio, and still pinch myself every day coming in here actually. So still a novelty.
And Heidi does actually have a video of her whole studio. And so the link is down below in the description. And I really recommend that you have a look at it, and then you'll get studio envy just like I did. And in fact, Heidi inspired me to go out and buy new IKEA furniture. We're both mad IKEA fans. And so I'm also sitting at a desk that's just the same as that one, but mine's a lot messier than yours. But I really recommend just having a look and seeing how Heidi has organized her workspace. It's really wonderful. Let's talk about how you also help other people. And this is one of them, your studio sessions.
I do workshops, like in real life workshops. And of course, this year during COVID, we've had some, you know, things being cancelled. I also do mentoring one-on-one with other makers, which I really enjoy doing. I really love being able to sit with another maker and look at their work, look at their Instagram, look at their website, and give them really relevant feedback, etc. And I really wanted these studio sessions, which are essentially online workshops. I wanted them to be kind of where mentoring meets workshops. So some very small groups of people, only 6 people at a time, plus myself. So lots of time to ask questions, lots of time to show me what you've made, and everyone else there. It's been a pivot. I have really loved loved doing them. I've had people from all over the world join in, which is also a benefit of doing it online. And they're really lovely and small. And it's been really nice to see people and meet people during this sort of year of isolation. So, yeah, it's been a really great exercise.
The ability to do the online workshops and give talks and things has just been such an eye-opener, and it's really helped a lot of us get through this period. You know, there have been some positives coming out of COVID, not many, but this is one of them. And these are really cute, and I know I have some of them.
Sure, I can't wait to see what you make with them, Lisa. So, Lisa, these are silicone molds that I've made. So, when I started making resin, or when I knew I wanted to start making resin earrings, I knew I would want to ultimately make my own shapes. And the beautiful thing about making resin earrings is you can make your blanks for your molds out of polymer. So I wouldn't be able to make the resin earrings that I make if I didn't know how to use polymer. So I credit, you know, my resin skills to a really good grounding in polymer. So, and what I love being able to make my own molds is I can make my own shapes that aren't out there. So, and what I've been able to develop is a series of molds for other makers to use that are really unique shapes. You can't make molds to sell by using other cutters that people have made because that's breach of copyright. So all of the shapes you see in these molds, bar the very small circle studs, are all hand cut, handmade by me, hand finished, and ready to be, you know, makers to add. Some people want to make their own molds and love it. Some people are a bit daunted by making their own molds. Some people want to buy a couple of molds to add to their collection. And I really wanted to sort of offer a product that, you know, covered all those things off.
I love the fact that they are handmade because they're not sort of cookie cutter molds. They're unique. And so anything that you make in them tends to be unique as well, because it's just the circles aren't quite round and the arches, you know, they're just slightly different. And I think that's really important, enable artists to have their own level of creativity while still using your molds, but putting their own sort of touch to it, which is great.
I absolutely love seeing what people make in them, and they don't look like my earrings, even though they're my shapes and they're shapes that I use a lot, but they don't look like mine. And I love that. I actually get a huge thrill when I see what people have made, and there've been all kinds of things made with them, with pigments and ink and all kinds of stuff, and foils and other inclusions and glitter. And I just love it. They look like the maker's earrings. They don't look like mine. So it's been a really interesting journey for me, and I'm really proud of these molds.
Great. I'm actually wearing some earrings that I've made with your mold.
I wondered. But beautiful.
Bit small to see, but yeah, the thing I like about, well, I think I love about polymer and resin is the lightness of them. And
yes,
I've made some earrings which are 2.5 inches long, and, you know, 2 or 3 components, and you look at them and you think, oh, that'd be really heavy, but they're not. They're absolutely feather light. They're amazing.
Feather light. You think you're wearing them. I know I'm a total wuss and I cannot wear anything heavy. I just cannot. Some people can, but I cannot. I just want to rip them out. So that's, yeah, it's really important to me as well.
Yeah, your book, which was an absolute eye-opener to me. I loved it. And I know it's been out now for about 6 months, something like that.
Yeah, it came out, I think, in February.
The layout, the step-by-step images are just great, and your instructions are really clear. I absolutely recommend this book.
A UK publisher, indie, they're very much a craft. They do lots of craft books. Publisher approached me, and, you know, after several phone calls, we decided to go ahead. And yeah, so they were wonderful in giving me a massive amount of freedom of choosing the projects, etc. But it's so complex process, but ultimately a really positive experience.
It's great, and it's an absolute credit to you. It's a lovely book. The final thing that I want to just talk about is your studio scrap.
If I hadn't have done studio scraps, Lisa, I don't think I would have been approached about a book. So look, studio scraps was me coming up with something, because after a while, when you start sharing some techniques and things like that, you start attracting followers that possibly aren't customers, but that are other makers, which is absolutely fine and, you know, fantastic. And I really wanted to do something and share something with those followers and makers, but I also wanted to monetize it, you know, so that I wasn't giving out everything for free. So what this is Studio Scraps is a weekly newsletter you get every Sunday afternoon. It costs $6 a month, and it's a really great way. It pushes me to write. It pushes me to create content. It pushes me to experiment. I'm currently experimenting with cold enameling and reporting back, in a sense, you know, to my readers of what it's like. So I hope that Studio Scraps was always meant to be like a sort of, you know, fly on the wall kind of look at how I work and what I might be working on that week, or my discoveries of certain materials, how I found working with XYZ. I'm never going to spoon feed you everything, that makes sense, but I'm going to tell you how this worked for me. And I don't know everything. I'm not the expert on anything. So when I share with you how I go with the enamels, it will be, this is how it worked for me, and I found that this worked for me, but it might not work for you if you decide to play with them and so forth. So I'm not about kind of from the very beginning, but I'm bringing people along for the ride, sharing how I stuff up things, because I stuff up many things. Really enjoy sharing that I love random things that are not polymer, and other makers that make beautiful things, whether it be soap makers or glass blowers or, you know, weavers or what have you. So I really enjoy sharing that kind of content as well. So it's a really fun thing, and it has been, I've been surprised to tell you the truth, because I know paid subscription newsletters are something that are a bit more popular in the US. I know Ginger has one. I'm a subscriber to hers, but we're not really a thing in Australia. So I wasn't sure if people were willing to part with $6 a month to get an email every week. So it's been an interesting exercise, but I do sell them. Not only do I send a new one out each week, but I also sell all the back issues on my online shop, which is a great kind of thing just to have, and it's an instant download. So it's content that's there available all the time.
I subscribe, but I also think that the back issues are great, because it might be something that you're just delving into, and you can,
that's right.
I wonder if Heidi's done.
Yeah, so like there's things on photography. You asked me about photography. It's funny, there's a Studio Scraps issue on that. I can almost sort of say that for it. There's even one on that, you know, there's a back issue about the make hype sell cycle that I do. So, and I'm quite honest about my process in those back issues. But yeah, it's also about, so if people find out about Studio Scraps later on, they can catch up, but it is also people can then pick the issues they want, you know, for things they need.
We place more value on something we paid for. $1.50 a week, but it's something, I mean, we get a lot of newsletters, and quite often I'm thinking, why do I even subscribe to this? Because I don't read it when it comes out. However, when you've paid, it doesn't matter, even if it's a small amount, it actually has more value. And so you go, oh great, Sunday afternoon, oh good, there it is, file them all away, and you know that you've got that reference. So I think it is an interesting concept. That was fascinating, Heidi. You know I love your work, and it's just been really interesting chatting to you and finding out more about your work and how you think, and it's been lovely. Don't forget, all Heidi's links are down below in the description box, and it would be really great if you would subscribe to this channel, because I have a lot more artists coming up, and I've done over 50 interviews already, and so please check out the other ones as well. So thank you very much, Heidi. It's been really great.
Thank you so much for having me, Lisa. It's been an absolute thrill to chat with you. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. So thanks, everyone. And please subscribe to this channel, and bye for now.